Welcome back to Encouraging Things. Today we're going to be making a steampunk walker robot thing, the inspiration of which came from this beaker that I got with my Elegoo Mars 3D printer, and it's for accurately pouring resin into the resin holder. And I have never used it for that. So we're going to use it for this instead. To start off, since the beaker is empty inside, I need a place to attach the legs. And for that I'm going to use this measuring cup that comes from a bottle of cough syrup. For the legs, I decided to use the X4 turret Final Faction figure, which has a firing action that fires off darts. Works great. Having designed this figure before I moved, I had forgotten how I was going to put the legs on. And as you can see, the bottom of the measuring cup is much higher inside the beaker than it's supposed to be. It's an easy enough fix. All I had to do is take two of the measuring cups and glue them together. And it should give me enough room in order to put the legs on where I wanted them to be. Unfortunately, the two measuring cups did not want to stick together. This isn't uncommon with these small packets of Dollar Tree superglues, as the last little bit of liquid tends to be the least effective. Having moved to a higher elevation where the air pressure is slightly lower, a lot of my crafting materials tended to expand in their containers. And it's no different with superglue. Even though it doesn't look like it's expanded, when you put the cap on and break the seal, it tends to squirt a little extra superglue. This time I decided to use this to my advantage, and I allowed the excess superglue to spill into the cup, and then I used that to spin around the inside of the two cups, which allowed it to seal the inside between the two seams. I did want to take a moment to mention my website, which has been down in the bottom left-hand corner since near the beginning of the video. I created the website because I've been on the internet for a very long time, and when you're on the internet for a long time, you tend to go through a lot of usernames, and you tend to go to a lot of different websites that cater to different interests. Because of that, and the way I tend to jump from interest to interest, I tend to leave things behind, and people often comment on the fact that I haven't been around. In most cases, if I'm not around, I'm usually doing something else. So because of that, I did create a website that hosts all of my content, or links to all of my content, and acts as a hub to places where you can find me online, whether it be here at Encouraging Things, or on my Discord channel, or on Twitch streaming games, or on my other channel where I do Let's Plays, or on other websites where I code video games or participate in game jams. These are places that you can find me, and Fordable.com is my website where you can find those places. It also has links to places where you can support me and all of my endeavors, whether it be here or those other places, through links such as PayPal, Patreon, and Ko-fi. So if you like what I do here and you'd like to see other things that I've done or will do in the future, go ahead and click on the link and take a look at my webpage. Having grown up in the 80s, when there was a large push to buy American and make everything in America still, even though a lot of the manufacturing jobs were going to the east, to China and Japan, India, and so forth. There was a term that a lot of people would use: cheap Chinese plastic. You know, when you compare an American toy to a cheap Chinese plastic toy, American toys had more value because they were American. In our modern age, I look at things like Final Faction parts, and a lot of other things, and we all know that they come from China. Well, a lot of our plastics do, even if it is bought in America or is American design. It got made in China and shipped over here. So I was thinking to myself, what is cheap Chinese plastic? Because I still use the term, usually to refer to something like Final Faction or Dollar Tree toys. But if a lot of the toys are made in China or shipped over from China. What makes it cheap Chinese plastic versus quality Chinese plastic? It can't be the store that you bought it in, because most stores buy their cheap Chinese plastic from the same places. So far, I haven't been able to come up with a definitive short-term way of identifying cheap Chinese plastic from quality Chinese plastic. But if any of you have any way of knowing the difference, apart from what it costs in the store or what store you buy it from, I'd love to hear it in the comments and understand your opinion on what would be considered cheap Chinese plastic versus quality Chinese plastic. So leave a comment and let me know. As I wasn't certain what type of steampunk design I wanted to go for, I kind of just put whatever Ripley's on there matched the aesthetic. I knew I needed to have gears, which I almost forgot to put them on, and I wanted at least one exterior gun. But I didn't want to overdo it because I wanted this machine to look like someone built it for a purpose. In normal circumstances, this would not work, but in some place like a cartoon, it would work perfectly fine, which is kind of the design I was going for. Once the walker itself was done, I actually wanted to put this on some kind of diorama base. Started out with this wooden block from the Dollar Tree, to which I glued a small chunk of tar, and this tiny pillbox made out of leftover Final Faction parts. From there, I had some rocks I found from the Dollar Tree, which I glued on separately. Now, in order to make some dirt, I did look up how to make dirt out of different things, including cork, sawdust, baking powder, etc. And the reason I did this is because living where I do, it's kind of hard to go outside and get dirt. And I felt like it would be fun to do it differently than just going out and getting actual dirt. But none of the materials I could find I either had on hand or wanted to make the mess out of, so instead I took a cup and I went outside and I found a hole that somebody else had dug. And in 20-degree weather in January, I scraped some of the permafrost dirt into my little cup, let it thaw, and then was able to use that to set up the base. Once I felt like I had enough dirt covering the base, I then took some PVA glue and water and used that to saturate the dirt in order to glue it in place. Once that was done, I took the whole thing outside and gave it a coat of gray primer. For the walker, I did try to do a zenithal highlight, but during the priming process I ran out of black paint, and it didn't come out as well as I had hoped. I then added a little bit of foliage to the base itself. I added a twig, which I got from a kit from Amazon. I always wanted to try to make grass out of the cheap dollar store brushes that I would pick up. Now, normally these brush heads come out very easily, but in this case, it seemed like this was a really, really well-made brush, so I decided to take a pair of scissors to it instead. Once I got the bristles cut to the size I wanted, I used super glue to hold them in place. I then gave it a spritz with my airbrush to make sure all the bristles were locked in. So how did it turn out? For my first real diorama, I think it turned out great. The scaling is a little bit off and the colors aren't exactly what I was going for, but as practice in order to make a diorama base with something on top of it, I think I did an excellent job for my first try. And as always, I'd like to encourage you to go out and make your own diorama. Doesn't matter how large it is or what you make it out of, what materials you use or what your theme is. But if you've never made one before, grab some material, put it together, and see how it looks. And you might just surprise yourself on how good it is. And as always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.